Everyone, this is Barb Bruno. I'm so happy that you're with us today because you know that every so often I bring an expert to you, and this is an expert that has gotten my attention. And I only bring people to you that I truly believe in because of what they do. A little bit on Nick Bliamptis' background. He leveraged his years of successful sales, marketing, and recruiting to launch ProfileGraderPro. And so what he's done is he basically can really enhance and upgrade anybody's LinkedIn profile. And you and I both know that LinkedIn is where we need to be in the recruiting profession. It is the largest, social network for our profession. And if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, individuals would be very inquisitive why you don't have a strong LinkedIn profile. The way Nick got my attention was he sent me an email and said, Barb Bruno, your LinkedIn profile really needs to be upgraded. And I almost laughed when he called me because I know it does. It's one of those things where, I'm writing a book, I'm doing other things, and I know what should be on there, but he gave me some insight that I never thought about. And so when somebody gets me to think and teaches me things that I was not aware of, and of course, LinkedIn has taught me a few things about LinkedIn profiles, but Nick taught me some additional things that I want to share with all of you. So you didn't come here today to hear me, you came here today to hear Nick. And so I want to turn the floor over to you, Nick, and I'm very happy to present you to, my training clients, and everybody take notes, and you will get a recording of this after it's over. And so, you don't have to write everything down. He's saying you will have a copy of these PowerPoint slides and, of course, a recording of the call. So, Nick, with no further delay, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the gracious introduction, Barb, and for hosting this series. So I'm Nick Bliamptis. I founded ProfileGraderPro, I guess 4 years ago at this point, to help people stand out from the crowd. There are like 600 million plus people on LinkedIn. So it's a marketing project. How do you rise above that noise? Before we get started, I was hoping to do just a quick audience survey. We can't quite do a show of hands, but if you type into the chat box, how many people on this call are running a recruiting firm? That's one category. Other category is individual recruiter. And then how many people are here for general information? Because you kind of do things a little bit differently depending on who your target audience is. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Also, housekeeping during the course of the conversation. Feel free to message any questions along the way. Happy to deal with those as they come up. If it's a really involved question, maybe we'll hold it to the Q&A session at the bottom. So without further ado, I think we're all at some level in marketing and aware of perceptions, but first impressions really matter. People form an impression of us in less than a second. I think the literature says back when people, pre-COVID, when people met in person, that people were forming durable opinions in 6 to 7 seconds and started forming that opinion in less than a second. The literature I've seen relative to looking at websites, and that translates to profiles, is within milliseconds, people are creating an opinion of what you're like. I haven't seen any studies that are specific about online classes. I'm sure you are forming an opinion of me and this class right at this very, very moment. But I guess one of the key ideas here is, if that first impression matters, how do we do it on LinkedIn? When you send a candidate to an interview, you may or may not tell them not to wear sweatpants or cutoffs or something, but we do that because we're trying to create that positive first impression. So LinkedIn profile strategy, the core of this is you want to create an immediate positive impression, and that's before they see a single word. So part of that is going to be at the very top of the profile. What are we going to use for images? If we're doing our job right in profile optimization, before they even get there, before they start reading, they've already formed a positive impression. I know that's a high bar, but as we get into this, I think you'll understand what I'm talking about. So next thing to think about is, who is your target audience? So if I'm targeting client business decision makers, that's going to be different than targeting the client hiring authority. And it's completely different than if you're trying to get a job. If you're trying to get a job, you talk about, it's me, I, this is what I accomplished. Maybe if you're going towards a hiring manager or somebody along those lines, you're talking about your knowledge of a particular industry segment. If you're going after a business decision maker, whether it's a CXO or somebody in HR, you may have more of more of a business slant to it. But in any case, the audience is really going to be one of the drivers. Just as an example, as a recruiter, if you put something in about which you might put in a resume about being the top biller or the most profitable recruiter on the team relative to the consulting staff augmentation services you've sold, that's great if you're going to get a job. But if I'm the client decision maker and I'm thinking about hiring you, knowing that you're incredibly profitable probably isn't going to make me feel really good about bringing you on board. So in terms of optimization for candidates, and this is kind of that making an impression from the first moment that they look at it. In the upper left, we've got Jeff Weiner, who's the former CEO of LinkedIn. Nice professional background photo, good professional profile photo. I don't think we really need to elaborate much on what LinkedIn is. Pretty solid, certainly not getting himself in any trouble. This may come as a surprise to you, but in the lower right is a CXO candidate that I ran into online. So clearly there's some work to be done here. The gray background photo, it's generic. You're certainly not moving people in a positive direction. The photo with, I believe that's a tortoise, not a turtle, but I'm not an expert on that. I'm not really sure what it's trying to convey. Knowledge is power in terms of the headline. It's a fine headline to share. Francis Bacon, no idea. It's a misattribution. The quote is actually from Sir Francis Bacon. So probably not. He may be incredibly skilled, but then again, people have that negative impression from the first moment, and they may never get another chance. So part of what's going on, and this is really, I think, more of what was happening with Barb's profile, which we'll take a look at a little bit later, is this idea of meta perception. So people really don't see themselves clearly, and that, we're socialized not to boast, right? Back when we had networking meetings and cocktail parties pre-COVID, there's always one person who sort of corners you and wants to talk about all the awesome things they've done for a half hour, but most people aren't like that. And the result is profiles that often undersell. The way that I ended up actually first starting this is I was helping a friend over a cup of coffee who was a former Madison Avenue marketing executive. And his profile was really kind of weak. And I was like, how is it possible that someone with this level of marketing background doesn't really see themselves clearly? So the photo on the bottom is from Jurassic Park, and I would recaption it, although I didn't. Objects in the mirror may be more capable than they appear. So here's a case study I'd like to take a look at. So a really generic recruiter profile. If we look on the first line, we've got the corporate logo, we got the gray box, unclear how substantial this company is. We've got a profile background photo. Again, we've got the gray box. Social media is really Facebook-like. Most of the posts look like good job, thanks for your help, that kind of thing. Zero featured content, and the photo is inexplicably off-center. So if I were to look at this in terms of that quick scan first impression, I would think this person is pretty generic. But looks can be deceiving. That's actually Barb's profile. So
generic? Oh my God, I'm generic.
We're working on it, Barb. We're working on it.
No,
well, the next slide, and this is like one of the situations, and now I've undersold you, as I understand it. I sort of looked online. The reality is a million miles away from being generic. And if I'm not mistaken, the number, I put down 250,000 plus, actually like over 1 million or 1.5 million students. What's the current number?
1.5 million, yeah.
Okay, so you are probably, one of the most extreme cases, but it's pretty common when I work with clients who are, in some cases, more on the candidate side, that they'll come to me and say, I see myself as a CXO, I see myself as a director of this, and on the inside, I'm thinking, there is no way that is ever going to happen. But by the time I sort of go through the materials and really have a longer discussion, look at resumes, they tell their story, it suddenly makes sense, although the presentation that they give initially is so far off the mark that you'd never know it. So what we're going to talk about is how to upgrade. So what I'm going to do from here in the presentation is sort of go top to bottom, and we'll look at each different element that makes up a good profile. So there's no single trick that makes a good profile. It's like, what makes a good meal, right? You can, I don't know, you can have the most fabulous ingredients, but if the recipe is horrible, or if the ingredients are old, or if I'm the chef for that matter, the results are definitely going to be suspect. So we'll start with corporate LinkedIn page. That's how Barb ended up with the that gray logo box. So that's because, as far as I can tell, Good as Gold does not have a corporate LinkedIn page. So, or either that or her profile isn't linked to it. So the corporate, in addition to getting the logo, a corporate LinkedIn page lets you create showcase pages. So those are pages possibly for different product lines or services, specialties with up to 20 keywords. So that obviously would help the SEO. And maybe most importantly, for people who are run a recruiting firm, it's a great place to put content that then your other team members can go and share. So images are sort of the next thing that people see, and we're looking at background photos at the top. So all things being equal, would you be more comfortable working with or for the company in the I don't know if you can see the cursor, but in the nice, beautiful family walking across a field in the sunset, or the gray box? Knowing nothing else, you'd probably go with the pretty photo in the other left. Ironically, that is from the corporate LinkedIn page for Purdue Pharma, which is at the center of the opioid crisis and is currently the most hated brand in America. But you wouldn't know that to look at the photo. So I'm not suggesting that we create any sort of image that isn't there. I'm just suggesting we sort of level up and make sure that people appear more accurately or present themselves in a better light. Similarly, if we look at the bottom, which of these doctors from the photo is more skilled? Presumably it's the person on the left, although the person on the left is just a model dressed up as a doctor. The person on the right isn't a doctor in any way, shape, or form, but that's actually probably the single worst profile photo for a client I have worked with, I have run into so far. The extent of the story is, it was a cold day and somebody gave me a fur hat and a scarf. So hopefully we're putting a little bit more thought into our branding than that. And ironically, the photo in the middle is a board certified emergency medicine doctor who works in Georgia and is nationally recognized. So if you have these skills and abilities, why wouldn't you present yourself in the best possible light? The next thing that people see are headlines. So that shows up directly below your profile photo. And these are actual examples. I looked up recruiters, sort of scanned through. I actually saw a few people who were recruiter at Coming Soon. Not sure that's really going to convey a particularly strong impression to your prospective clients. And someone else is an executive recruiter in accounting and finance and has a Wharton MBA. I'm going to guess the second person is the better recruiter, but the truth is I don't really know. But again, it's this whole thin slicing thing. At this point, you've seen nothing more of somebody who's viewing the profile, seen nothing more than the background photo, the profile photo, and the headline, and they've already formed a pretty durable opinion. And if you haven't succeeded at that part of the profile, they may not scroll further down. They may not look for more. They may have seen enough. So I'm sure all of us are very familiar with the open to work or open to a new job feature. There's also open to hiring, open to providing services. Just one more thing you can do to market yourself. The next thing that LinkedIn does is they highlight things in common. So they like to, this is at some level a social networking platform. They want to show, who do we know in common? In what groups do we share in common? So it's always a good idea to expand your network. I think back in the old days, people sort of viewed it as, if this isn't somebody who I know well, I don't want to network with them. I think the current thinking is more, if I have a legitimate business reason to know this person and they want to work with me, I'm happy to have that connection. So I'm not suggesting we accept all of those connection requests from China or Singapore, but if someone in your industry segment wants to know you, and I'm sure people are already doing this, you would want to accept it. I did some back of the envelope math at one point, and for every connection you add to your network, it expands your third order visibility somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 contacts. So that's certainly more upside to expanding it than downside. And in terms of groups, we'll talk about that more in a little bit. If you're in the same groups as people within your target marketplace, if you're operating a particular niche, that certainly is helpful. Again, going top to bottom, assuming you succeeded and created a good impression at the top, moving onward from there, we come to the about section. So again, we want to think about things in terms of the audience and put it in terms of what is going to be exciting to my target audience. My sense is that people do what's referred to as thin slicing. If you have giant paragraphs, I think people's eyes glaze over and they maybe skim it but don't really see it. If you put it in short bulleted points, it makes it easier for people to take on the information. If you add in numbers, even better, because those really are memorable. And then at the end, there should be some sort of call to action. Again, I had a couple of recruiting examples that really struck me. The first one is an in-house recruiter. It's not really NewCo, but I thought I'd change it as opposed to posting somebody who's on this call, posting their profile online. You know, what excites me about working at NewCo, working with highly collaborative executives, rigorous approach, consistent growth, continually recognized as the best place to work. Clearly, this is someone who's thinking about the target audience. Another recruiter, an executive recruiter at that, at least by title, took the about section a little bit more literally. So they wrote, outside of the office, I am very active and social. I enjoy sports, exercising, etc. I'm always up for parties and gatherings. I don't know who the target market is for that, but if we're to look at this as all the elements in your profile, sort of like being a gas gauge and you want everything you do to move it more towards the full end of the spectrum, this is definitely not moving the needle in the right direction. So next thing to take a look at is the activity and featured activity section. So if you just share something or like something or even write an article, it's going to show up as we see in the lower right. It's just kind of like a little tile. So if you write something like "good job," good job, Rick, all you're going to see is a tiny little postage stamp of something, which you can't really see what it is, and then it's going to say "good job, Rick." So at a minimum, you should title those a little more thoughtfully, and then you should also be aware that after, I think the current version is after 90 days, that information goes away. If you tag something as featured content, in particular, maybe something that you wrote about, it gets, as you can see in the upper left here, it gets a huge piece of real estate at the top of your profile, and it gets about almost half a page as opposed to a postage stamp. So it draws a lot more attention to that information, and that's another one of those topics that Barb and I are going to be talking about soon. So under the experience section, I've seen a lot of interesting stuff. Obviously, our project manager consulting projects on the side with the gray box, that's a pretty worst case sort of description. But a lot of times I see people cut and paste a section of their resume, or they cut and paste even the job description, which has lots of jargon, huge amount of information. People just really want the highlights. They want to know, what have you done and are you good at it? And once again, think of this more as a marketing brochure than as a reference document. So short, sweet, with lots of bullet points and numbers. So here's another example that I found. This is a vice president of licensing and business development. I don't know who this guy is, but they're responsible for over 80% of their company's revenue stream and grew the revenue from 140 million to 360 million over 10 years of sales leadership. I'm thinking if you're looking for a business development leader, this person is pretty definitely going to get the call. And we do that for each position. Clearly, you want to give more space to the positions you want to draw more attention to. So ideally, the current job or the most recent job would have the most information, and then it's sort of you're making things farther back in time less important by giving them less column inches, for lack of a better phrase. Education, I put this here more for completeness. There isn't really there aren't a tremendous number, not tremendous amount of flexibility here. But one thing you can do is certainly add in details if it's particularly relevant. Here we see for this person at business school at Boston University, their MBA was in marketing and entrepreneurship. People earlier in their career typically put in even coursework because maybe they don't have as much to talk about inside of their job. And this is a question that comes up a lot. I think degrees that are more than 20 years old, the date when that degree actually happened becomes optional. And I think people know, in my conversations with clients, most people fall in the category of maybe hoping that they look a little younger, so leaving those years off can help a little bit in that. Obviously, you know, if you proceed in the process and there's a resume, you may have even more information. But at this level, again, marketing brochure, not official documentation is helpful. And then there's some percentage of people who are like, no, my experience is what makes me valuable to my clients. I want them to know how long I've been doing this. And you know, again, each of us knows for ourselves, I guess, and perhaps for our candidates for that matter, which category they fall into. Now, skills gets a little bit more complicated for this audience, actually. I'll explain why. Skills are typically one of the key ways which recruiters use LinkedIn. It drives the SEO within the LinkedIn environment. If you are running a recruiting firm or getting your candidates ready to look better before they go in for an interview, perhaps if you're an executive recruiter, we don't really want to bolster the skills to make those candidates look better so that other people find them and recruit them. That's definitely not going to help our cause. That said, the top 3 skills are probably things that for your profiles you want to highlight, things that you're particularly good at or particularly relevant to your clients. As you can see here, actually this is from your profile, Barb, A+ for this particular portion. It maxes out at 99+ on endorsements. That said, endorsements are, I'm not sure how helpful that feature is. I don't know what other people out there have seen, but you can have someone who, actually, Barb, I'll use your profile again. You have 89 endorsements for sales. If we went on to the next page, which is awesome, but oddly, you have only 8 endorsements for selling skills. So it's really easy to have these Yeah, I know. But again, if we don't manage the perception, just picture if for whatever reason the way your skills or endorsements were ordered, the first thing on there were selling skills, 8+, right? Oh, am I going to take a selling course from Barb? I don't know. Maybe she's not really that good at it. I say this kiddingly, but if you have a conversation or there's more information, you get a chance to deal with that. But the snapshot that people get may be very misleading. So my general advice, unless you're in the Barb category, is you can go into the settings and you can turn off the number of endorsements. And if you think about it as a recruiter, let's say you're entering a new niche of some kind and you want to display that as a skill. When you first enter the niche, presumably you have 0 to 1 endorsements on that. If you highlight that and you have 99+ for training, 99+ for recruiting, and 0 endorsements or 1 endorsement for, going back to our CXO candidate a while ago, for tortoise wrangling or whatever, people are going to know you're not really good at tortoise wrangling. So you can just turn that off, and then it shows the skill, but doesn't show the number of endorsements. I am curious in chat if there's anybody who's finding endorsements to be a super helpful feature. I would be interested in knowing what that looks like, or how many people are finding that to be a really helpful feature for them. So from there, we get to recommendations. Again, this is another marketing opportunity. 3 to 6 recommendations is relatively average, but one of the things that's interesting about this is if you have received no recommendations and you haven't given any recommendations, then the section doesn't even show up. And I don't think in terms of that gas gauge moving towards full or 100%, anybody looks at that and says, oh my gosh, this person doesn't have any recommendations, let's not talk to them. So I think it's more upside than downside. That said, if you're in the situation where you have given 1 recommendation and received zero recommendations, now the section's displayed and you have, this person has received 0 recommendations, and that's not really helping you. The other thing that I've seen is some people read in really substantially into the ratio of recommendations. You don't want to be in a situation where you've received 27 recommendations and you've given 1 recommendation, or you've given 0 recommendations. People are gonna read into that. And I guess if you're if you're a psychotherapist or some other corner case where there are issues why it's not appropriate for you to endorse back people in the other direction, or excuse me, to recommend them, that might be a factor. But for the most part, you want to maintain some kind of balance.
Nick, just so you know, it's right down the middle, because I've got 21 people. I was just cutting this up that said endorsements are extremely helpful, and they even copy endorsements under their email. And you've got 18 people that said that they don't find endorsements helpful at all. So it's more find them helpful than not, but it's pretty much down the middle.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thanks for the data, and I will change I will modify my opinion on that particular feature. That's really good to know. Thank you. All right, then we get to the accomplishments section. Again, this is more of a and volunteer section. This is like recommendations. I don't think people notice that this is missing and then say, oh, this person doesn't have any volunteer projects, or they don't have any languages listed. But that said, you do have the opportunity to make a positive impression. In terms of certifications, and this is I just give the list here so you know what's available. LinkedIn Learning courses, when you complete one, you get the little icon down in the lower right-hand corner is a license or certification for having taken that course. From a marketing perspective, it's kind of a lot of bang for the buck. And as I think most recruiters get LinkedIn Learning, the former Lynda content, for free. So great way to sort of demonstrate interest and some level of effort in what for you is a new area. Trying to think if there's anything else worth noting here. Languages, I always stayed away from that, even though I speak both French and Greek really badly. So there is an option where you can list the language and list sort of the level of skill that you're at. So you're not, if somebody clicks on it, they will see that you are not actually fluent in that language, but have some level of capability. All right, then we get down to interests. We're now down to the bottom of the profile. And that's really comprised of influencers, companies, groups, and schools. And as we dig into each of those, we'll talk, influencers are people like Jeff Weiner, Elon Musk, Oprah, that sort of thing. Generally, people who are influencers are positive. I haven't really seen anybody follow a super controversial influencer, although I'm sure in the modern era that is quite possible. Companies, certainly you should be following, the key companies in your space, potentially clients, et cetera, if that's appropriate. Ironically, in a lot of cases, it doesn't make sense to follow your own company, and I'll explain why. I was helping a friend of mine runs a PR firm, and I was helping her team sort of upgrade their profiles. And these folks have helped startups raise over $1 billion. They've got tens of thousands of followers on Twitter. They can create a Twitter storm, at the snap of a finger. They've done all sorts of really great PR work. That's the good news. The bad news is LinkedIn wasn't really an important platform for them. So at the time, despite the many tens of thousands of followers online on Twitter, their LinkedIn followers was like 113 or some ridiculously small number. So what I was picturing is you have someone who's saying, wow, I love this firm. I really want to work with them. And then they get to the bottom and they see, oh my God, these people are a PR firm and they only have 113 followers. Are they any good at this? I'd expect to see a PR firm with like a massive following. And the truth is, it just wasn't something that was important to them. So, just as an example, Barb, when you create a corporate page, you're originally going to have 0 followers. So over time, that will change, but you may, actually, you're a special case. You have more than enough other stuff in your profile to compensate for that. But for a lot of people, not following your own company actually makes a lot of sense. In terms of groups, and this is where the not Facebook note comes in below, a lot of people join groups because they think they're cool. I've seen clients with part of the cat humor group or something along those lines. Again, this isn't Facebook. This is a professional networking site. At least with groups, if you go into the settings, you have the ability you can choose. Is this something I want to share with my audience or not share? And in some cases, if you're in some group that requires some level of confidentiality, again, you can belong to the group without actually displaying it on your profile. Companies, on the other hand, there's no way to follow the company but not display it. Schools, relatively straightforward. LinkedIn, when you add something to your education section, it automatically gets listed under the schools. So underneath all of this is what are referred to as sort of the halo effect. So something to think of when you're following any company, group, or influencer is following this person going to advance my cause? Again, this is a marketing project. Is it going to make me look, is it going to move that fuel gauge towards, 100, 105%, or is it somehow going to backfire? One of the more classics is I see a lot of people follow the Harvard Business Review because they want to, actually, maybe all of them actually read the Harvard Business Review. I don't know, but I think some of them do it as much as anything else for image purposes. So again, just like we've discussed at each level, this is a marketing project. So in terms of conclusion, before we take some questions, step one, who's your target audience? Because the messaging is really going to be quite different. And I will say there's sort of an art for my corporate clients to working with them so that the person looks good, super credible, represents the company enormously well, but doesn't look like they're ready to go to another job and we're not really advancing that cause. So for me, you need to think about the audience as you create it. And in my situation, when I'm creating a profile for someone, I need to think about who the audience is, but frankly also who the client is. It's a marketing brochure, not a resume. So we've got the 1 second rule. We want everything to add up and sort of point in the right direction to get people to advance that fuel gauge all the way up to 100%, so people are super impressed. And the way you do that, there's not one trick that miraculously fixes everything. It's like all of these little things together add up. So with that, Barb, I don't know if we had questions that came in, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that people have.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions and a lot of remarks. So one of the questions was that Lynn said, I get so many invitations that are veiled as I help companies with financial planning, et cetera. They're trying to pitch me their services and I don't want what they're selling. So should I accept or politely decline or just remove those invitations to connect?
I politely, yes, we all get those. I politely decline those, and because it's not it's like, do I have a legitimate business reason to know this person? I want to know this person for my business. So, if you're calling on a particular market niche or whatever, let's say you have a geographic focus and, you handle all of the people who work at zoos in your particular city. I'm not sure that's a great niche, but just as an example, if somebody from the San Diego Zoo reaches out to you, you're kind of like, yeah, absolutely. I would love to connect with you because they're in the same market and it's worth knowing them. Somebody from San Diego who's going to sell you marketing services, yeah, that's all you do by accepting that is open yourself up to getting, because I've done this, we all have, I think, open yourself up to getting a whole lot more in-mail messages from that person pitching their services. So I walk on by when I see those.
Yeah, and just so you know, Lynn, I do the same thing because in fact, sometimes people just in a general want to connect, and then the minute I connect, they start selling me. And if somebody sells me right after I connect with them, I'm done, because I don't know them, and I think that that's in a way it's almost rude. Now I can tell you, Nick, that after you gave the training about our recommendations important enough, and we were kind of down the middle, the people that are using recommendations got very vocal, like potential clients and candidates read recommendations. They show up, the recommendations show a pattern of consistency about our track record. People quote our recommendations often. We refer them to our LinkedIn page and ask them to read recommendations. I copy recommendations off my LinkedIn profile and include it under my email signature. So the group that said they did use the recommendations are very vocal, saying that they absolutely positively got them clients and got them candidates. So
Right.
wanted to read all those.
Yeah.
Lynn also wrote, the languages are very important for clients who are seeking multilingual candidates who will work with global clients, and it's great for diversity hiring as well. So in our profession, depending on your niche, depending on what you're looking for and the criteria, the listing languages, if in fact people are looking for diversity or bilingual candidates, that's important. Now, Lisa was asking, how do you tag a post as a featured content?
Sure. Before I get to that, hold that thought for just a second.
Sure.
So LinkedIn has two features, and it does get a little bit confusing. So there's this idea of recommendations, which is somebody writing, Barb did a great job. I took the training and went out and closed this amazing deal, or something along those lines. It's a fully written thing. Those are awesome. No quarrel about the usefulness of that. It's more, there's this idea of endorsements. So for you, I forget if sales training was one of your skills, people go in and say, thumbs up, Barb is good at this. And then next to on your profile where it says you have a skill in sales training, there'll be a little 99 plus next to it, or an 87 or an 88 or a 2 or whatever. So I was talking, when I was saying I questioned the usefulness of it, except in an extreme case like yours, it's the endorsements. So it's the little number that shows up next to your skill. Recommendations are awesome. I have no quarrel or no question about that.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. So our next question from Lisa is, how do you tag a post as a featured content?
Yeah, if you go into your homepage or little social media feed, and you have a post, in the upper right-hand corner of it, there are 3 dots, and you click on those, and I think the first menu option is make featured content.
Okay, perfect.
That's all you have to do.
Awesome. Lisa also is asking, what if your target audience is both business decision makers and candidates?
Yeah, pretty common. In that particular case, I think you're going to want to talk. The messaging is actually kind of similar. You're going to want to talk about your experience inside of the niche. You're going to want to talk about your experience, success, credibility, length of time you've been in it, perhaps indicating you focus on a relatively small number of niches. Again, you're messaging in that direction. So they're not hugely different, but they're both very different than if you're looking for a job. So one way you're talking about these are the kinds of positions I work on. This is how I can help you. In the other case, you're talking about these are the kinds of companies I work for, and I'm really good at it. And it's just a different. That's where the key difference is.
So the follow-up question to that is, how do I list on my profile if I focus on 2 different niches, accounting and chemical engineering? That's from Marcus.
I think you just say it straight up. I mean, I think if you have 17 different niches, right? You know, it's like if you have a list of 17 things, it's pretty clear you don't specialize in any of them. In your case, you basically just have to list them both. And what's really interesting, what makes this kind of complicated in a lot of cases is, you know, in a job search, people have 2 different resumes, right? You're applying for the accounting job, you send one resume. You're applying for the chemical engineering job, you send the other resume. In the situation with your LinkedIn profile, you can't do that. You only have one LinkedIn profile. So what I often ask clients is to look at it. I don't know if this applies to your situation, but I say look at it from like an 80-20 rule sort of perspective. Like if the vast majority of your revenue is coming from, you know, one particular source, maybe you emphasize that more and then give second billing to the market that you're not as involved in.
Great advice. Okay. Lisa wants to know, how do recruiters get LinkedIn Learning for free?
So I don't know which LinkedIn recruiter licenses it is packaged with. I know it's packaged with a full recruiter license. I have to assume it's packaged with enterprise. I don't know which of, I know it's packaged with some of the LinkedIn recruiter packages. I don't know where the cutoff is in that. Would need to sort of look up a product table on that.
Right. What I would tell you, they really changed the pricing on LinkedIn Learning, because what they used to do, and the only reason I know this is I've got 15 courses on LinkedIn, recruiting courses. And what they do is companies can buy a membership for X amount of dollars when they're an enterprise company. And then anybody can take any courses they want. And they've got courses on everything like photography and cooking and bug watching. And I mean, it's amazing how many, there's nothing that they don't have a course on. Okay. But what they realize is individuals don't necessarily want to pay a monthly cost, you know, that's an ongoing monthly cost. So now they are selling the courses per course. And the average course is somewhere between like $20 and $30. And that they just started doing this about 6 months ago. So you can take the first couple of lessons of just about any course that they have free. So if you click on LinkedIn Learning and you just put the topic of what you want to learn, different courses will pop up, and almost every course you will have a couple lessons free. But then if you want to hear the whole course, then they'll give you like it's $20 to continue or something. So they're nominal fees for their courses. But again, you know, if you've got an account with them, you know, then you can watch numerous things. And they do have learning paths. Like they have a recruiter learning path where if you take these 6 or 7 courses, then you get certified in recruiting or certified in sourcing or certified in. So LinkedIn, you know, gives you a certificate of completion for either a course, or they give you a certificate of completion for a learning path. And if you just go to LinkedIn Learning, all that information is there, and they're, you know, and they're pretty much, they're very open on that, on how they're going to do that. Lonnie wants to know, do you have any tips on creating content from a marketing standpoint?
Yeah, I think when you're creating content, I mean, creating content straight up from scratch is, you know, it takes time. You can do it yourself. You can hire a firm to generate that kind of content for you. I think the best hack that I've got is you go to, and I sort of have hacks for every single aspect of the profile, but for that particular one, is to go to a high value publication for your industry and just share an article. But I think what's important is you don't share the article and just say, wow, good article. You probably write just a sentence saying, either quoting the title directly or a good summary of quoting the title. So then it shows up not just as like the little tile that's, and next to it it says, good job, Jim, or or Jane, or something along those lines, the little tile shows up, but then it also says, what the content is. So again, when you work in social media, you want to think of it in terms of not just what do I want to share, but how is this going to appear on my profile?
Right, and when you share an article, it appears in your feed. It also appears in the person who wrote the article's feed, and then anybody that likes it or whatever, it appears in their feed. So it gets widespread. The other resources there are, if you're looking for original content, is you can use Fiverr. It's Fiverr, or you can use Upwork. And both of those resources are people online. And Upwork bought Elance, and Elance used to have hundreds of freelance writers. Now you have to make sure that their first language is English. But if you go to Upwork and say, I need an article written, an original, not copywritten article written on this topic, and you literally post a job, people apply directly, and you just quote them what you're willing to pay for it, flat price on either Upwork, which is UPWORK, or Fiverr. Fiverr does anything for $5. And they're hoping that once you use their services for $5, you'll pay them more to do more work, and that's Fiverr. But again, sharing other articles, as Nick said, is just a really great way to get content. So I think you see why I brought Nick to you, and I don't mind that Nick threw me under the bus, really. I think it's good for you to see that, I mean, there's obviously ways that we can all improve our profiles and things. And again, I understand the importance of the LinkedIn profile. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I write 2 posts a week to just keep the following strong in that, but then I have a weak profile. So, Nick brought to my attention all the different things that I need to change. So I hope you learned from what he told you. I hope you learned from my mistakes. I don't mind showing you that, I mean, there's things I need to improve as well. I'm always open for suggestions. And I really, really appreciate you all being here. Now I have somebody asking me to repeat the sources. So you've got he'll do a free LinkedIn profile review for you, by the way, and it's free. And so if you want him to look at your profile, because he gave me one and I was like, oh God, I've got to bring you to my group because you just showed me things that I wasn't even aware of. So if you want him to do that, email him at nick@profilegraderpro.com. And then the 2 resources I mentioned for content is Fiverr. It's like the number 5, Fiverr, or Upwork, UPWORK. But again, make sure that their first language is English, and don't quote an hourly rate, quote a flat amount you're willing to pay on Upwork, and then people will be willing to do that. You can get great content normally from the Philippines. People in Manila and the Philippines have very low rates, and they have better mastery of the English language than most of us do. So you've got to be careful that you're getting quality. But Nick, I can't thank you enough. I love the questions. Everybody is now saying, thanks so much for the great content. I hope you all learned a lot. Our LinkedIn profile is your calling card. If you don't have a large following, I mean, people do go to our LinkedIn profiles, and without you knowing it, sometimes your first presentation is when they click on your LinkedIn profile. And when you think about that, I mean, that's scary. And I think you might have seen an article I wrote recently that human beings have a less attention span than a goldfish. Because I used to put an article out there, are you a shark or a goldfish? And for some reason, I looked up the attention span of a goldfish, and they have a longer attention span than a human being does right now. They have 5 seconds, and we're lower than that. And when I mean, that's research that was done, and I was like, that's pathetic. That the people that read your LinkedIn profile have a shorter attention span than a goldfish. That's why what Nick just told you today is so important. If somebody goes to your LinkedIn profile, we buy first with our eyes. Just like when food is served to you, you buy first, when you look at food, it's the presentation on the plate. You can have a hamburger look better than a steak if it's presented properly. And so that's your LinkedIn profile. And I don't think any of us can afford at this point to have a weak LinkedIn profile when people, sometimes when you call somebody, they pull up your LinkedIn profile as you're talking to them. I know I do. If somebody calls me, before I get on the phone, if they're not in my ATS or CRM, I've got their LinkedIn profile pulled up as I'm talking to them because I don't want to talk to anybody cold. And so that's going to happen more and more, everybody. So please take this call very seriously, because this will impact your ability to have a record year this year, because you don't want people to disqualify you when they click on your LinkedIn profile and decide, nah, next. You never want them to do that. So please sign up for the free LinkedIn profile review. And Nick, I thank you tremendously. You gave us a great amount of information. And again, I'm glad he used me as an example because I will, take the steps to upgrade my profile. So if you go there a month or two from now, I'm not going to say I'm going to do it today, but if you go there in the future, you'll see the changes that I've made. But it was a good example because, again, we can all learn and everything keeps changing out there. So I hope that as a result of this call, that when people go to your LinkedIn profile, what they do next is they reach out to you because that's what we needed to do. It's a sales presentation. It's a mini sales letter. It's not regurgitating your resume, and it can't be boring. And it can't be gray, obviously, like mine, because that's very boring. Nick, did you want to add anything at the end of the call?
No, I just, again, as far as the offer of a profile review, if I can, I'll give you a snapshot, and if I can help, I'll help. And if you're already doing fantastically well, I'll give you a few tips, and you can get back to making it a great year.
Well, and I want to say that that profile review is that free profile review. Again, I don't want you coming back to Nick 6 months from now. So if you want him to review your profile, try to do it by the end of this month, in all fairness, to Nick, that he's kind of allotted some time to do these. So please get on that because, again, we all need, obviously doing a LinkedIn profile is not my strength, and I don't think it's many of ours. So I appreciate you, Nick. I appreciate all of you for showing up, and you will have the recording. Please share this with everybody else in your offices or anyone else that you think can benefit by this. So have a great day, everybody. And Nick, again, thank you. I love that you were on the call today, and I think we've all benefited. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb.